Hi, everyone. This is Bob Dietrich with another edition of the ADHD Toolbox. And I have a very special guest here today. Her name is Helen Irlen, founder of the Irlen Center in Long Beach, California. And if you haven't heard of Irlen, then you're going to be in for a big surprise and potentially some solutions for some of you out there, because Irlen is focused on identifying a condition that looks like ADD, or ADHD, but isn't. And you're going to want to definitely hear about this information. So Helen, thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm so pleased. It's always one of the things that I really enjoy doing is educating people and getting people to understand that populations are different and diagnosis can be one, just because you have a label doesn't mean that it's always the same thing. So we'll have a good time today.
Yeah. Well, let me tell the audience a little bit about who you are, and then let's jump into your story. Hear about how you started the Irlen Institute, and what it's all about, and how it relates to ADD or ADHD, and we'll go from there. But Helen, it sounds like you're a credentialed school psychologist, licensed therapist, adult learning disability specialist, and an expert in the area of visual processing disorders. So while working with adults with learning disabilities, Irlen has made a discovery that resulted in a marked improvement in her students' ability to attend and perform. And so today, there are over 220 affiliated Irlen testing centers worldwide, helping children and adults with reading and learning disabilities, dyslexia, and ADHD. She's been on 60 Minutes, on Doctors, on ABC News, and on numerous TV shows around the world, National Geographic, newspaper articles, magazine articles, television documentaries. So you've been around and you've really been able to spread your word about Irlen quite efficiently. She's the author of Reading by Colors, The Irlen Revolution, a guide to changing your perception and your life, how a simple method can change the lives of children and adults with LD, ADHD, TBI, dyslexia, autism, headaches, medical conditions, and much more. And her newest book is a sports, concussions, and getting back in the game of life book. So we'll have to discover what that is. In fact, why don't we start with that? What is that all about? That's the latest book, right? And it just come out?
That's my latest book. What has happened that got me into this area is the fact that we started to see Marines who had been over in Iraq and Afghanistan and suffered concussions and TBIs from blast injuries. And to date, our research is we've seen 500, and they come to us because as a result of concussions and head injuries, they have constant and chronic headaches, which become migraines at least once a day to once a week. They no longer can read, they can't attend, they're not functioning, and they're very light sensitive, and they have been referred to us. And the method that I developed has eliminated their headaches and migraines, given them back the reading skills that they had before they entered the military, and let them be able to perform and function. For me, it's an interesting group because what I get back is hugs and statements of "you changed my life, thank you," or "you've given me back my life." But with typically, that's a different population because they've acquired the problems that we work with. Typically, the problems we work with are inherited. So it's fun for the child because we say, okay, you get to blame either your mom or your dad, and they get to blame either their mom or their dad. And they immediately go, wow, this isn't my fault. I'm not a bad kid.
That's great. Well, tell us about your story. How did Irlen get started?
Irlen got started because of the fact that I think I'm a divergent thinker and I question things. And after doing psychoeducational evaluations of children in public school for 10 years plus years, I was finding a discrepancy between those that I could identify as having a problem and those that I couldn't, and those that I couldn't identify as having a problem. And the teachers would say, come in the classroom and watch the child struggle. So there was a definite disconnect for me that all the psychoeducational evaluations that I do aren't identifying all the children who are struggling and have needs. Um, at that point, when I was kind of questioning and saying, what questions aren't we asking? What are we missing? I was asked to start the first program for adults with learning disabilities at a university level. And that was a great population for me because nobody could say that their problems were maturational. You couldn't say that they were motivational because these are the kids that had been working 3 to 4 times harder just to make it into college and were really working hard and struggling to stay in college. So, and they were old enough that it wasn't maturational, it wasn't motivational, and they had been through all the testing because they were highly verbal. And the parents kept saying, what is it? So they would put them out there and have testing and try any kind of treatment that was already there. So that was my population that I decided I wanted to study and say, what are we missing? And they educated me as much as I educated them because I got better and better at asking the right questions. And there's some key questions, if you know how to ask, you're going to get some really interesting responses that you wouldn't expect. And so that's what led me down the road of the discovery and then finding a method to change things so they could be just like everybody else.
Got it. Got it. So, so you have a process or a something called the Irlen syndrome, right? And so that's what some people could have, and they may be misdiagnosed with ADHD, right? So what would you describe Irlen syndrome as?
Well, it's a visual processing problem.
Mm-hmm.
All visual information is not read by the eye. It goes from the eye back to the brain. And it travels from the eye to the brain as colors or wavelengths of light traveling at different speeds.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, they inherit it or they acquire it through head injuries or certain medical conditions. Certain of those colors or wavelengths of light, the timing is off. So by the time it reaches the brain is overworking and working and working too hard to process it, creating a lot of the symptoms that look like ADHD, creating pages of print that look like optical illusions, and interestingly enough, creating an array of physical symptoms. And nobody associates physical symptoms with reading or some of the triggers that, because this problem and the brain having difficulty processing and working has certain environmental triggers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually how we design the classroom. Because you want me to go into there are 2 different populations. And the majority of the population has no problem with any of the environmental triggers, such as fluorescent lighting. That's why we went and have fluorescent lighting. My population experiences difficulties performing, attending, focusing, and triggers physical symptoms under fluorescent lighting. White, high contrast, black on white. We used to have blackboards with black print and white, black print. Yeah, black backgrounds and white print.
Right.
Yeah, did I get it right? And now we went to green boards and now we're in white boards, okay? We now do a lot of things at school on computer screens and they're backlit by fluorescent lighting. And any type of visual intensive activity such as reading and copying and math can all create these symptoms. So if you take a child in the classroom, you're building one trigger on top of another trigger, on top of another trigger, and then you look at the child and you wonder why they can't perform, why they can't stay focused, why they're feeling restless, and they can't tell you what's going on because you haven't asked them.
Got it. So why is your discovery of this important to the ADHD population?
Because, and we have research to show the percent of those who have ADHD that actually have Irlen and do not have ADHD, and what percent have both. and what percent do not have it at all. And if you misdiagnose, so you can't look at just the main triggers, lack of focus, distractibility, fidgetiness, because that overlaps with a lot of other conditions, including Irlen. We can separate out if it's Irlen or not, whether you need medication or not. You don't want to take medication if that's not what's going to be solving your problem. If you're taking the medication for ADHD and they keep upping the dosage because it doesn't seem to be helping, or they add another medication on top of it, you really do want to stop and wonder what you're doing to your brain with the medication, if it's really necessary, or it could be something very non-evasive like the Irlen method. I'll tell you an interesting story. It happens to be my own grandson. And he's a very bright child. When he gets into a subject, like he got into fishing, and he'll watch anything on fishing he can. He wants to know all about it. And we thought, he's going to just sail through school. Got into second grade, and my daughter gets a phone call from the teacher. I think you need to come in. We need to talk. And I think a lot of your parents know that feeling and have heard the teachers call them in and know what they're going to tell them. And the teacher said, yes, I've been tracking your son's behavior, and he fidgets a lot, and I track every time he fidgets, and if he gets up and he goes to get a drink of water, and he doesn't seem to look at me when I'm talking to him. Have you thought about taking him to the doctor? I.e., let's put him on medication and make my life easier for me. And luckily, my daughter obviously knows better than that. So we explored other options, one being Irlen, especially since his oldest sister has Irlen, wears Irlen spectral filters, because that may be the underlying cause. And so putting him on medication is not what he needs. So you want to do and be able to figure out what's the right course of treatment, so that the child can be successful. And you don't want to medicate unless it's necessary to medicate. And for some children, it is necessary. But for others, it's not necessary.
Got it. Got it. So you have over 220 affiliated Irlen testing centers. So if somebody thought they might have Irlen, they could go into one of your centers, which is possibly close by, and get
Yeah, in addition to that, to make it easy for people, we have a website, and the website has self-tests on it.
Got it. Okay, I was
So
wondering.
you can take the self-test, and I'm going to kind of go through some of the questions that we have to kind of educate, hopefully, those people who are listening, because you're going, well, I wonder if that's me or not. So the self-tests are really a good way of saying, I never thought about this. Is this happening to me? Then maybe I don't have ADHD, or I may have ADHD in addition to Irlen, okay? There's been numerous studies done, and I'll just quickly mention one now, that there was a study done in Israel. They looked at a large population of those who were identified as having both Irlen and ADHD. And 50% of them, once they were treated for Irlen, no longer showed any of the symptoms of ADHD.
Wow, that's fantastic. So it really is powerful.
It's very powerful and can change your life. Absolutely.
So what are some of the symptoms that parents might find or discover that has that may be like, I think my son or my daughter might have Irlen, or even myself, right? Because adults diagnosed with this in adulthood, right?
Yes, we see a lot of adults as well as a lot of children,
Right.
and especially since it's hereditary. So
So
you
Irlen
get a
is,
lot of parents, because the parent comes with the child and they sit in and they go through the whole process, and then we take a look at them. And so we
so
see,
we know that ADHD is hereditary. Are you saying that the Irlen syndrome is also hereditary?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
got it. So,
Beside the fact you can inherit it for certain medical conditions like Lyme's disease and other things, and head injuries and
okay.
concussions. It's all, ADHD is brain-based. It's just certain parts of the brain that light up with ADHD.
Mhm.
Irlen is brain-based, and there are other parts of the brain that light up with ADHD. You have an overactive brain, and that affects your ability to perform. When you want to look at, and you ask me, what are the things to pay attention to?
Mhm.
Some of them definitely can, let me give you an example.
Yeah.
The parent has a child, regardless of the age, and they seem to build breaks in what we would call breaks, but it looks like the child just doesn't want to do it, is doing it a little bit, then looking up and looking around, looking away, puts his head down, and kind of is resistant to continue. Interesting with Irlen, the longer you do the task, the worse the problem gets. And so if you're an adult and you're in control, you just can stop and take a break. Children manifest that by getting fidgety, getting up, getting distracted, getting angry. So you get a lot of those components. The questions we're not asking are twofold. One is, at that point that you want to take a break or stop reading, how do you feel? How do your eyes feel? Um, do you start to get tired, sleepy, rub your eyes? Are you blinking or squinting? Do you get headaches? People don't associate headaches with reading, unless you get headaches with reading. Reading isn't supposed to give you a headache. Reading is not supposed to put you to sleep or make you tired.
Right.
Reading shouldn't make you dizzy. So we never, ever ask those questions. But for the population we work with, things change and get harder the longer they do it. And that's why they start to look like they have ADHD. Also, beside the physical symptoms, and the array can be irritability, anxiety, anger, in addition to physical symptoms, something's happening on the printed page. And if that's the way you've always seen the printed page, and you look at your neighbor's page and it looks exactly the same, you don't know to report that that's a problem. Okay?
Mhm.
But with Irlen, things happen or change. Things may start to move. Print may move, print may disappear and reappear. Things may be flickering or flashing on the page. The page may be like so bright, but you don't realize it, that it's like as uncomfortable as if you're in bright sun and the sun starts to get brighter and brighter. So it gets harder to focus, and it's harder to stay focused, because the longer you do it, the worse it gets. So we identify all those things that are going on. Are you skipping words, skipping lines, losing your place? Do you have to take breaks when you read? How do you feel when you read? How do your heads feel? How do your eyes feel? We evaluate all those things, and then we get rid of all of them. It's interesting for me because I get different reactions. I had a child, and when I asked the question, do your head bother you, or do you get a headache if you read long? If you read long enough, because none of these things may start at the very beginning, it's as you continue.
Mhm.
And the child said yes. And the mother says, well, you never told me. And the child said, you never asked me, right?
Yep. Yep. That sounds right.
And before we had podcasts, I used to speak to large audiences. And one of the questions I would ask, and how many of you think that reading is supposed to put you to sleep. If you just read long enough, you get tired of sleeping.
I thought that was normal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you get some hands that go up because they think it's just normal. And then they look around and they see not everybody's hand goes up. And so it's an education for both. And for those who don't get tired or sleepy and who don't get headaches are amazed that there's a population that does, because we're not asking any of these questions. Um, you know, I guess I should, in terms of full disclosure, I have to tell you, I'm the person that can sit down with a textbook in the morning and read nonstop until I have to go to bed at night, right? So on my scale, I want to make everyone just like me.
Right.
Making it so much easier, so much more comfortable, and so that you don't get misdiagnosed and you can make these issues go away.
That's fantastic. So people who are struggling with ADHD could be misdiagnosed. We've talked about some of the symptoms that could come up. You certainly
Right.
can go to an Irlen center and get tested. And if you can get treatment, if you do have Irlen and you get treatment, you could see all of your challenges go away potentially if it was just Irlen and not a coexisting case of Irlen and ADHD.
Yeah, 2 points. One is when you say treatment, we use colored overlays and create specific colored lenses for each individual, because everyone's brain is uniquely different.
Right.
And for us to calm the brain down, we need to figure out which of those colors or wavelengths the timing is off and only filter those. And for the ones we need to filter, we have to independently figure out how much we need to filter it. And that's the way we then calm the brain down, let it function appropriately. And the changes are immediate. So when the parent comes in, it's just 2 appointments, and we start out by asking certain questions, doing certain tasks to create an awareness. Like you say, I just thought this was normal. This is how it's always been for me. I just thought everybody else is luckier. They can do it better and easier. So we need to create that awareness, and for us to also know, and for the individual we're testing to know, what are the things that it shouldn't be like? So you can stay focused and attend and sit still and read for hours on end with good comprehension. And then we find the overlay color that stops all the distortions and takes away all the physical symptoms. And so they can immediately see the difference. They can immediately feel the difference. And if they're then a candidate and this has made a moderate to significant change, then we go to the second appointment and we create the lenses that they wear.
How old are the children that you start working with? What's the youngest age you start working with?
Typically, we like to see children 7 years of age and older. That's not always true. Again, I'll tell you the story of the parent whose daughter was in Irlen filters and recognized it in her 3-year-old. The 3-year-old was doing physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech and language therapy. And she called and she said, "Would you test my 3-year-old?" And I said, "No, we don't test 3-year-olds." So she went to each one of the therapists and said, "Would you please work with him for a week or 2 and turn off the fluorescent lights?" And then they came back to her and said his improvement was dramatic, just turning off the fluorescent lights. So she called me back and she said, "Okay, Helen, that's what happened. Now you're going to test him?" And I said, "Yes." Now I'll test him. So, but typically we want to have children at least 7 years of age or older.
Got it. And it's simply colored overlays that you determine are the best ones for a particular person, right? And
that gives us our initial identification of whether they're a candidate or not a candidate, whether this method will help them or not. It's non-invasive. And how much improvement, how severe are they? You can have a problem and be on a continuum from slight to moderate to severe. And people need to get that information. So it's a real education for people. I never realized that I look at those people who read forever and I think something's wrong with them. Me, I don't know how they do it, right?
Mhm.
So it's a matter of educating people as well of what really can be, so they're not diagnosed with lots of misdiagnoses and lots of mislabels, and
Mhm.
so that they can perform. Um, and so we do first the overlays, and that's one appointment. And then if this makes a moderate to considerable difference, then they get to our Irlen spectral filters specifically, uniquely designed for them, meaning for their brain, so
Mhm.
that their brain is calm and can perform at peak performance.
That's awesome. That's amazing. So if I'm a parent out there looking for a solution for my child, thinking maybe I want to have them tested, or even myself as an adult, I want to be tested. And we know you've got 220 testing centers worldwide. How do we find your testing centers?
Okay, again, www.irlen,
Mhm.
IRLEN.com.
Got it.
And that will also give you the self-test. It gives you tons of information, and it lists the diagnostic centers. And we also have screeners, over 1,000 screeners throughout the world too.
Got it. So Irlen.com, we have the website link. You could just click that below. You can also, there's also an information email down there and a phone number if you want to call in, or if you want to send an email asking for more information. Um, Helen, this has been a real eye-opening possibility. So this is great. Thank you so much. How long have you been doing this?
How old am I? No. Since 1980. That's
1980.
been how many years?
Yeah,
40, 30, 40 years, something like
40
that.
years.
Yeah.
40 years. So that's
Long
fantastic.
time. I mean, we've seen millions and millions of children and adults.
That's crazy. That is awesome. Thank you for all the hard work and the great work that you've been doing, you and your organization. And we'll definitely be sending some people your way. And thank you so much. Irlen.com, click the links below. And if you want any other information, make sure you send an email or give them a call. Helen, thank you for being with us today. I appreciate your
Bob,
time.
Bob, thank you for allowing me to share the information with your audience. Hopefully we get to change some lives.
Exactly. Yes, we will. And thank you for being on this episode of the ADHD Toolbox. We will see you on the next episode.